back to what's going to be the last episode of I Am Dead. We were looking for Greg, and I think that Morris is going to have to be the guardian eventually, but let's find out. Anybody in here? Ew. Bathroom. Right in here. Oh, it tells me when I'm in the right location, like there's somebody. Edie Newen.
I only knew Greg briefly, from the summer that I took over the campsite and he retired. He seemed harmless enough, if a bit strange, living in that nasty little caravan. As part of his official handover process, he gave me a big box of rule books that I was apparently supposed to give every camper when they arrived. I couldn't believe them. The amount of inches apart each tent had to be, the angle of pitch, permitted colours of guy ropes. No skipping ropes, marbles, conkers or throwing games. No singing with hand drums. I built a huge fire on the beach, invited the whole site for a big party and burned the lot. But then, awkward, Greg showed up. I guess he'd been collecting some things from his caravan and came to see what the noise was all about. You could tell he wasn't comfortable, but he sat down and tried to make conversation. I told him how beautiful I thought Shelmerston was, and he started telling me all about the wildlife here and the best places to spot birds. He was actually quite a sweet guy. He must have noticed what we were burning, but he never mentioned it. That was the last time I saw him. I always felt a bit guilty. I mean, I got him wrong. He wasn't that bad.
Well, that's a good thing she kept one of them. It must be around here somewhere.
I'm gonna guess the desk? Is this it? No, that's maps. A little Game Boy play box. Nope. No. Nope. Nope, not there. Did you put it in your dresser? Oh, found it.
What's this about dogs having to be on leads the whole time? Outrageous.
So we found this.
I'm getting the scent of Grenkins again, Morris. I'll pop up to let you know when we're close to one.
Okay, thanks. Oh, there's more stuff and things. Let's see. Wait, what's this? There's people in the play tunnel. Oh, these are toys. I see. Giant shell. Hmm. Anyone? Here we go.
Miles and I came to Shelmerston for the Sheller Cup final. Miles was the world champion for ages. Greg, the campsite manager, was a huge Sheller fan. Always gave us the best pitch on the campsite. Miles was up early every morning, training for the big race. Greg would always be lurking in the background, taking photos. It became rather annoying. How many photos did he need? Oh God, and one time he turned up at our barbecue and wouldn't leave. The man could not take a hint. So, race day arrives and Greg is there with his camera, of course, getting in everyone's way. So Greg leans out into the track as the pack came past, Miles in the lead. And Miles goes crashing right into Greg. Total disaster. Miles goes down and Quasi flies past him to win the race. Miles was absolutely gutted. He definitely would have won it.
It's a weird
Later
game.
that night, all us Shellers were on our way back from the pub, and we heard Greg outside his caravan, just sat by himself, crying. Miles, he was such a good sport, went over and spoke to him, invited him over to our camp for a drink. So then Greg came back and hung out with us, brought his camera and showed us all his Sheller race photos. You know, that guy was actually a pretty great photographer. By the end of the night, Miles had forgiven him. Miles was good like that.
Shellers? I've never understood the appeal of that. Seems bloomin' uncomfortable to me. Poor old Greg. He was always rubbing people up the wrong way, but he meant well. And he really loved this place.
Camera, need something triangular. I don't understand how this isn't it. I mean, it's shaking. That seems like a cheat, because I got it from the other way. But whatever. Okay, I don't see a camera there, but there's a camera at the campsite. Like at the beach party. No. Well, it's at the beach party, I guess. Where would this camera be? Oh, it's right here, duh. Whoops.
Oh, I wish we could use this. I am a very photogenic dog, you know.
I think all dogs are photogenic. Okay. What is this? It's way past their bedtime, but Arthur, Katie, and Sir Bumbleton are up on a big rock, keeping an eye on the Sheller party. Who's Sir Bumbleton? Our toy, I guess. Oh, I don't know what that is. Looks like a kayak, maybe. Yeah. It's backwards. Is it this? Oh. Well, that one looks funky. Alright, but is there anybody in these tents thinking? No. Like this one. No. This little one? No. Okay. This one? Yeah, there's one here. Oh, goodness. I do not think this is the right shape. No. Nice. Must be in this tent. Yeah. Sandy needles.
I love camping. We've come to Shelmerston every summer with the kids for years. Okay, our tent is a bit bright, but that means the kids can always see it. Greg seemed angry about everything this year. He told us our tent was outside of the regulation colours, and being around the kids seemed to really upset him. But they were only being kids, just running around playing. Greg was blowing that bloody whistle every 5 minutes. One day, Greg confiscated my little one's kite. He was terrifying. We still sometimes get nightmares about it. I had to do something. When I saw Greg put the whistle down, I pinched it and took out the pea. You know, the thing that makes the noise. I threw that pea somewhere Greg would never find it. You should have seen his face when he blew his whistle and nothing happened.
I always wondered how Greg managed to get so good at hand whistling.
I'm looking for a whistle pea. That stuff is tiny. Still has nightmares about Greg Litterland taking away his kite. Oh. do not see a pea there. It's probably in here. Poo. I guess so. Do I have to really look at all of these? Oh, come on. Oh, it's a little bit different. Okay. Looks just like the poo, though.
Oh, the smell of rabbit poo. It doesn't excite me the way it used to when I was alive.
Alright, back out. And we're looking for the last person. In here? No. In here? Yes. Who are you? Been a twitcher since his granddad showed him his first water rail in Beckenham. Well, actually in Elmer's End, between Beckenham and Penge. Birdwatcher.
My whole life I've dreamed of seeing a Jempson's sea owl. One day, I read the news that a guy on this little island called Shelmerston had discovered one. I had to see it. The only B&B on the island booked up really fast, so I decided to stay at the temporary campsite set up by the guy who discovered the sea owl, Greg Litherland. The atmosphere was amazing. There were twitchers from all over the world come to see it. Greg had given the owl a name, David Abrahams. A bit weird, but I guess he was the one who found it. And because it had no mate, it was lonely, and he'd made a model female owl out of concrete. That was quite impressive. I got to know Greg a bit during my stay. He really seemed to resent all the noise and fuss on the island. His island, as he thought of it. And the irony was that he was the one who'd got everyone excited about coming to Shelmerston. Greg told us he'd take us up in groups to the owl's nest site, but I snuck up early with my camera. It saw me and it flew off hooting and I didn't get a picture. I was gutted. I had to make do with a picture of the model. It wasn't the same.
I remember that. All those bird watchers suddenly arriving and nowhere for them to stay. I didn't think Greg had it in him to start a campsite, but he somehow pulled it together.
What is that? I don't know what that is. I don't think it's in here though. Eyes wide open. Boopy. I had one of these, only I called it a bop it. Probably they can't call it a bop it, but I totally had one of these. Oh. Rough. Alright, but I have to find the statue. It's weird that it would be in here. So not there. Does he have it in here? No. I mean, obviously no. How big is this thing? No. Where is the owl statue? And how big is it? Welly. All these wellies. I mean, I can't lock on any of them, so. No, can't do the bush. Nothing there, and it wasn't in here. How do I find this owl? Can I just like zoom into the ground or something? I mean, there's only one thing to select in here, and it's not in here. And it's not in his, because we just looked in there. I guess that just leaves the washing up station. Well, let's just like really small, but it looks pretty big in the picture. Yeah. I guess we just look in the washing up station. Oh wait! It was hiding.
Oh, poor old David Abrahams.
Oh no, there's another one. Lonely owl. Oh, I see them though. That's handy. It's quite far away. My goodness. Okay. This is two people? Oh no, that's just what's coming off the top. Okay. Maisie Wilkinson.
My best thing is throwing discs. I am really good. I like playing with Dan and Toddler. It's our favourite thing when we go camping on Shelmerston. One time, Greg Lifflin came up the beach, all red-faced like an angry tomato. He pointed at a sign. It said, "No throwing games." He was yelling and shouting at us. He told me to give him my disc, but I wouldn't. I threw it high up into the air. And it went bang into a massive bird. Then the bird fell into the sea. I felt so awful. I never meant to hurt the birds. The whole thing was terrible. Mr. Lifferlam was screaming. He waded into the sea, picked up that bird, and carried it back to the beach. He was crying and crying. I'm sorry, Mr. Lifferland.
Aww.
Oh, Greg. Poor guy. Oh, and that poor bird. I guess that explains why he was always so prickly.
All right, there's supposedly something. I'm just like super, I can't figure out where this stuff is. Is there anything on the outside I can do? No. Oh. Cricket set. Blue Diamond Jr. Oh, here's the frisbee though.
I love these things. Reminds me of our walks on the beach.
It's not there. Oh wait, there was is it in here? No. Man, I don't know. Oh, that's how I get in here. That's empty. No. Oh, is it this? I bet it's this. Yeah. Okay, we're not going to try and find the rest, though. It was nice to find that, though, because it's bugging me. Okay. Back out, all the way out. Time to release Sparky.
Woof! Okay, I've got his scent. It was quite faint, but I'm a very good dog. Let's go find him.
Okay. Time for a goo cocoon. Oh, grumpy Greg.
Greg! Oh, hello.
Morris, what are you doing here? Oh, hello there, pup.
Hi, Greg.
You can talk now. Rather prefer my animals when they don't talk.
Yeah, Greg, we need to ask you, would you be interested in being the next island custodian? It's a very important job.
Oh.
A
No,
very important
absolutely
job.
not. This is your mess, and you can sort it out.
My mess? Well, how do you mean?
You dug her up. I warned you, and I warned you when we were still alive that those archaeological digs were a bad idea. And now we know exactly how bad.
Well, now hold on, Greg. That's not how that works.
Oh, isn't it, talking dog? 3,000 years, no eruptions. you dig Aggie up, and then suddenly her grip on the island is weakening? Well, some coincidence that sounds like.
But, I didn't. I never did.
No. There's no way I'm doing that job. It's too much obligation, it's not my responsibility, and frankly, one lifetime of humans was plenty for me. Now, I'm going to stay right here until I can find David Abrams.
Fine. Thanks, Greg. See ya, I suppose.
Thanks, Greg.
Kind of relatable. One lifetime of humans was plenty. Oh dear.
It's not looking good, is it, old girl?
Don't worry, Morris. I hate it when you worry. It makes me nervous.
He's waiting for David Abrams. I guess I'm like him in that way. The most important person in my life wasn't technically a person, more like an island.
Yes, the island. This island. A whole island's worth of people and stories. Not like Greg at all. Everyone loves you.
Really? Well, loved me, perhaps, past tense.
No, they still do. And there's one more person who loves you we need to talk to. Our last prospect. I just know we're getting close now.
Hey, Sparky, how do you know all this stuff? I mean, you're just my dog, aren't you?
Well, nobody is just anything, Morris. I'm mostly the dog you raised, but I'm also kind of a messenger, a scout, part of something bigger. Aggie sent me to help guide you.
Aggie sent you?
No time to explain, Morris. We have to get to the last prospect.
Well, however it came to be, I'm glad I get to spend more time with you, old friend.
So am I, Morris. Now, off to see Samfire down at the harbour.
Ah, Sam. Yeah, lead the way, girl.
Aww. Boats of Shelmerston and a seaplane.
Ah, the harbour. I always loved watching the boats come in and out. Never did get around to expanding the fishing exhibit, did I? You remember coming down here with me?
I'd have liked it better if you'd have let me swim.
I love your confidence, Sparky. But you always thought yourself a bigger dog than you actually were.
Oh. Lots more boats than there used to be, though, aren't there?
Certainly are. Shelmerston got busy. Though this is busier than even I remember. Say, how long have we been doing this search?
Oh, I don't know, Morris. Once you're dead, time seems to be a bit less important.
Does it? Oh, I don't know. I suppose it seems a bit galling that time and everything else keeps moving even though I've stopped. Makes a man feel unimportant.
Oh, you're not unimportant, Morris. You're saving the island. And to do that, we better go find some people who remember Samfire.
Yes, Sam surely understands the feeling of watching everything change. Fishfolk live for, what, 200 years? That's no small amount of change.
Not volcano change, though, Morris. And that's what we need to avoid. Off we go!
Fish folk? Oh! One of the fish folk! Oh, I'm gonna like finding Sam. Sam was one of the first of their kind to fully integrate with the ways of the land, taking a position of responsibility as Shelmerston's harbor controller. Sam played an important part in helping the island to retain its own identity in the face of industrialization and tourism. They were an integral member of the Save the Morlos movement, whatever that is. Here we go. Oh, there's somebody in this boat who remembers. Gugh. A wild fish person.
I swim with a pod south of the Fire Isles. I believe the dry-siders call the larger one Shelmerston. It's where the ceremony happens for the dry-sider who stopped the world from cracking. That's where I first heard talk of toast, and where I met the friend called Samfire. I did not believe it at first. A food which snaps so dry. Then one morning at sunup, I followed the ship and caught a blackened slice as it arced into the water. This was the start of my lifelong love of toast. I saw Samfire on the dry side and came up out of the sea to ask them for toast. They asked me to put on some pants, but I refused to denigrate myself with dry-side fabric. No matter, I had brought some shiny coins with me that I found on the seabed and secreted in my swimming folds. Sam took me to their parents' toast shack, but they refused to serve me without clothes. They also told me that my shiny coins were unsuitable, too old. So Sam lent me some trousers, and I swept the toast shack in return for crispy slices. Sam taught me some of the ways of the dry-siders, but to be honest, I'm only interested in the toast. I never wanted to eat anything else. Sam understood this.
Toast.
I spend my nights swimming through the black waters of the deepest ocean trenches. By day, I come up onto quayside and fill up on the finest crusted seedy bloomer, almost black. No butter.
No butter. Cute.
Oh, I could really go for a nice piece of toast right now. But, yeah, with butter.
I have to find the toast. Oh. Why would the toast be in the propeller? Okay. Looking for toast. I can't rotate this one, which might be a problem. Whoops. Wrong button. Okay. Oh, I can rotate once I'm in here. Toast. Toast. Toast at the wet bar? No. Toast in the chair? What is all this? Oh, it's a life jacket. Breakfast. Nope, no toast in the sofa. Toast in this chair? Oh!
It's a shame, but it doesn't seem like there's a whole lot of toast on this side.
That is a shame.
I'm getting the scent of Grenkins again, Morris. I'll pop up to let you know when we're close to one.
I'm not interested in your Grenkins, Sparky.
By the time Sam started as the harbour controller in '79, the fishing industry in Shelmerston was on its arse. No way to compete with those factory trawlers from the mainland, was there? Couldn't moor those things anywhere near the island, even if we had them. Of course we were all smuggling, stands to reason, done it? There was no money. All those old fishing sheds on the quay, the ones the tourists like, were falling down. Old place looked, pardon me, like a tip. There was a lot of trouble at first. Sam trying to stick by the rules and catch us out any way they could, and us trying any which way to give her the runabout. Wasn't easy, mind you. She was smart, that Sam. You never knew when they were going to pop her head out of the water beside your tub. And to be fair to Sam, some of them smuggling boys were bad uns. Worse stuff than booze on some of them boats, and that's the truth. Probably no bad thing Sam put a stop to it. But in time, Sam started to see how things were, how we do things, and we came to an understanding of sorts. If Sam turned a blind eye to a bit of the decent stuff, the harmless stuff, then we'd report the worst of it. I mean, we all want to keep the seas safe, stands to reason. Plus, Sam was partial to a bottle or two of the sheep shank on occasion. Oh, yeah. Sam was sharp as a gutting knife. They made us hand over some of the, shall we say, dividends to fix up the quay. All them sheds and that. Make them into something we can be proud of. Turn things around for Shelmerston, that did. Now we get more of those tourists since the big ferry started. And they love a day out on a boat. Ken takes them all out, he does. At the same time, Sam organised a kind of work-sharing thing with the fish folk. Got some of them to swim along with the fishing boats, help them locate the biggest shoals. Gave those big trawlers with all their fancy radar gear a run for their money. We'll never be big players in the fishing down here. But thanks to Sam, we hold our own. Bless him.
I reckon I still have a bottle or two of sheep shank stashed away at the museum. Don't suppose anyone will ever drink them now.
Yes, yes. Ooh. I don't think there's anything down here. Special reserve.
Ah, a different kind of spirit to the ones we've been looking for.
They're such weird little shapes. Okay, all done with this one. Who's next? Aw, cute. Wake up! The volcano is gonna erupt. He's right, though. Aha! A toucan.
I first met Sam when I sailed the new ferry, the Queen of the Isles, into harbor. Of course, I'd heard of the fish folk, but I'd never met one. Sam was an amazing pilot. Knew the waters better than any boatman. It was strange, steering a course for someone actually in the water, but we never went wrong with Sam to guide us in. Next time I was in Shelmerston, we went for a drink at the Camel. I'm more into bats than beer, but Sam was intriguing, and the atmosphere in there was great, like a warm nest. Great band, too. Awesome sousaphone player. I think we got on because we were both a little bit on the outside of things.
It's Ogden back there.
Sam invited me over for toast and hot chocolate.
Honestly, hot chocolate doesn't do it for me. But the toast, that multi-seed bread. Sam made the best toast. I told Sam that next to a good cuttlefish bone, that it was my favorite snack. I stayed over. In the morning, we went for a walk along the beach. And just as the sun was rising, I took them flying on my back. We went up and looked down over the island.
Aww.
Sam wasn't scared at all. They said it was like swimming through the air. It was on the next trip to Shelmerston. We just sighted land when Sam's head popped out of the water right beside my berth and passed me a fresh cuttlefish bone, carved especially for me. When we moved in together, it was the best day of my whole life. I put that cuttlefish bone on my bedside table within beak reach. I still look at it every day, every single day.
I just remembered that time Blythe and I did a duet at the karaoke. I can't believe I agreed to it. Must have had a few too many. I never knew how Sam and Blythe met.
Like this, yeah? Oh, sideways. Kippers. Oh, a ball of yarn. Alright, let me out. We gotta find the thing. The cuttlefish bone. I mean, these are cuttlefish bones, but they're not the cuttlefish bone, I guess. I mean, maybe it's not like in this room exactly, right? It just shows up. Compass, rivet needle, engine room. Oh yeah, it could show up in here too, I guess. Okay. Wow, that is a complicated shape. Oh, it's this. Oh, the insides of the pool table. Interesting. That one looks tired. Okay, carved bone is not in here. I mean the pool table. So I don't see why it would be back here. It means a lot to him. Oh, they're candy bars. That's cool. And these are different chocolate bars? Oh no, they're the same inside. Okay. I don't think it's in here. Unless it's in this cupboard. No, no dartboard. I don't think it's in here. Maybe it's in the boiler room, like in his office? Nope. Nope. I mean, it can't be in one of these, right? Two heads, huh? What about this one? Nope. This one? Still no cuttlefish bone, though. This one's tough. If it's not with him, and it's not in the office, where would it be? Alright. There it is. That's very cute.
Oh, I used to love finding these on the beach.
Okay, 2 more to go.
It was the 6th summer after I spawned that I went to my first Aggi's Day ceremony. You know, Aggi, the dry cider who saved the world from cracking in two. We don't go on land until we're 6 years old. It's all swimming, wafting around. Standing up is hard at first, the weight distribution. Anyway, I went up dry side for the ceremony, and that was where I first met Sam. It was so loud and hot out there, all that shell blowing. I was bored, and my body felt dry and heavy. I was too young, really. There were souvenir stalls selling bracelets with little stones of polished lava. I wanted one so bad, I would not shut up about it. Sam saw I was fed up. They took me up the beach, away to the dunes, and Sam gave me a little polished stone of my own to play with. Had a heart of gold, they did. It wasn't until years later that I found out it was a tiny replica of the one Aggi died on. We became good friends. Sam helped a lot. They were always on my side. My pod, we were quite traditional, didn't like us working with the dry siders, but Sam talked me into going for the job as a diver on the new harbour. If it wasn't for them, I don't think I'd have tried. That stone was my lucky charm. I took it with me when I went for the interview, and I took it down with me when I went on my first dive. I had a pocket made specially in my tool belt. Sam took me under their fin, invited me out to the camel, and let me stay with them and blythe on the ferry if it was a late one. And there were plenty of late ones. Karaoke nights are still my favourites. Every time I feel that lucky stone in my pocket, I think of Sam.
Sweet.
I
Devon
remember
toast?
all the fish folk coming up on the beach for Aggi's Day when I was a lad. Seems less of a big deal these days. I guess they still celebrate it, but, well, it's a lot more sedate. Back then, oh, it was a huge event.
So I'm looking for the stone then. Nope. Looking for a rock. Oh, box of teas. Nothing buried in the coffee grounds. Kettle. Oh. Oh, it's the coil. How? Oh yeah, there we go. That took me way longer than it needed to. File box. There's so much tea. Business table. That's satisfying. Someone's cheating? Liars. Foul mug. Gross. Wait, what was in there? What was that? Weird. Toast box. It's not there, it's not there. Maybe it's in the locker. Oh, cricket. Is it under the hat? No, I can't click the hat. Is there anything in the cricket? No. Donald's lunchbox. What is that? Oh, it's like a meatloaf with an egg in it. Alright, computer desk over here. Looked everywhere else. No. Ivan's chocolate stash. Circuit boards. Okay, filing cabinet again. More books, more cables. Still can't click on those. What's that? Lost mouse ball. Not a rock, I guess. I don't see anything else that I could search. Like, it can't be inside these folders, can it? There's nothing else to click on, so... I mean, it must be... Maybe it's up here? Oh, no way. It's gonna be in his pocket, isn't it? Yeah, there it is. That took me too long as well.
Oh, magic stones? I knew humans were superstitious, but I thought the fish folk would be a bit more savvy.
So there's one left. Just to find one more person now. Out, out. Out, out. Alright. Anybody thinking? Oh! Winkle Bob. Looks like Steve Ermintrout.
When I was a kid, I hated the annual Morlo cull. I was kept away and found excuses not to be there. Then, aged 10, my dad marched me down to the beach with other men and put a knife in my hand. It was the worst day of my life. I saw Morlos slit from jaw to belly, more blood than you could imagine. I didn't sleep for months after.
Aww.
But you grow up, don't you? I never felt it right that we was killing Morlos, but what could I do about it? I was just a fisherman. One day I see Samfire, the new harbour officer, handing out leaflets on the quayside. Stop that cull. I went along to that first meeting at the campsite. Greg Litherland was one of the other organisers. It was beautiful. So much hope around that campfire. When I spoke about the pain of the Morlo, it really felt like the young uns were listening. Me, Sam and Greg held regular events to raise funds for badges and patches. I was proud to wear mine on me best Gansey.
I don't know what a Gansey is.
There was quite a rift between us and the old guard. They felt the ban was an attack on our ways. Sam and me took a load of the fishermen out for a beer, and Sam made them listen. They really respected Sam. We got most of them on our side that way. By 87, we finally felt like we had enough support to push for change. So the week before the Morlo showed up, we organised a mass dying on the beach. There were loads of us lying down on that sand, islanders, fishermen, fish folk all together. And the press showed up, and the mainland TV, and for the first time in 500 years, we stopped that cull.
I'm so glad we don't do that cull anymore. I was proud of Sam and that lot when they finally made the old uns see sense. And, well, I did my part. Held a lot of those early meetings at the museum, we did.
Aw, Morris. So I'm looking for, is that like a button or a patch? I guess it's a button. And I'm not sure what the special thing is. Just making sure I catch everything. Buckets. Buckets of buoys. Guess it's not here. Where would I be if I were a button? That's fine. I guess we can check the break room, or the galley. Condiment cupboard. Nope. Oh, the thing's here. Okay. Closer. There it goes. Well, that's done. Now just the button. It's messy. Ham and pineapple. Nothing against people who like ham and pineapple, but I don't like it. Nothing in this messy sink. Bananas? Oh, I bet it's in here. Oh! Found it!
Oh, I love Morlos. Such gentle creatures.
Now we just gotta go out and release Sparky.
Oof, Sam. This is an easy scent profile. I'm coming, Sam.
Bark, 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 bark. Hooray. Cocoon time. Toast.
Ahoy there, Samfire!
Morris and Sparky! Oh, lovely to see you both. What can I do for you two?
Well, we wanted to ask you something. It's about Aggi.
She doesn't have long left now, does she? Poor thing.
No, not long at all. We were hoping you might replace her as custodian.
Oh, Morris. I spent years of my life as harbour master trying to keep people from meddling with nature. I don't feel any differently now. I'm appreciative of all Aggi has sacrificed for us, but the island spirit isn't evil. It just needs to erupt from time to time. And if it needs to now, let it, I say. Let nature do what it must. As the fish folk say, the tides will tell.
Yeah, Sam, I hear that. I really do.
No! No, Morris. We can't just give up.
Now, we'll talk about this in a bit, Sparky. Sam, it's always good to see you. Will you be around later?
I think I will. A volcanic eruption is a rare and beautiful thing. I think I'd like to see it.
Oh man, that looks angry.
Okay, we just need to talk to Aggi. She'll know what to do.
No, Sparky. I've been thinking about it, and I think Samfire's right. I think it's maybe time to let the town go.
No, Morris. It's not.
No, it's all right, Sparky girl. It's over. This isn't my town anymore. The only ones around here who remember me are ghosts.
That's not true.
No, it is. But that's all right. Truly it is. Everything for a season and all that. And I miss the people I knew. The people who've moved on. I want to see them again. I think I will take Pete No-Chop on his offer and head into the west with him. Shelmerston doesn't need Morris Lupton any longer.
Morris Lupton, you will not give up. You have been granted a precious responsibility and you will honor it.
Sparky?
I'm sorry about that. Remember when I told you I was mostly Sparky? I am, but mostly.
Then what else are you?
I am the rock that you stand on. The wood you people built this town from. The magma bubbling beneath your feet. I am Shelmerston. And right now, I want to erupt. But I have also made connections to the things that live here. Connections I want to keep alive. I need you, Morris.
Right. Well,
And I'm still your Sparky. And I need you, Morris. We all do.
Oh, Sparky.
I know you feel forgotten. I know you want to move on. I do too, but I can't until I wrap up this last bit of unfinished business. Will you try one last avenue with me? If we still can't find a solution, then I'll be done. It'll all be done. And we can go into the West together. Please.
All right, Sparky. One last try. But who else is there to talk to?
Aggi.
Aggi? But where is she? I mean, she's everywhere, isn't she?
She is. But I can sniff her out. I just need some mementos.
But where would we find mementos from back then?
Oh.
Oh. Of course.
Back to your museum, Morris.
Okay, let's go.
Ah, well, it's reopened. Well, I suppose that's good. Need to keep up the footfall. Everything has to move on.
Well, yes, but, you know, it is still your museum, Morris. It wouldn't be here without you.
Ah, it was never my museum, Sparky. It was Shelmerston's. It's changing, but, you know, I think it should. So, what happens now? How do we find 4,000-year-old memories?
Ah, come with me, Morris. There's one more thing I ought to show you.
Oh, okay, Sparky.
Okay. Festival of the Sea. The final day of the festival is known as Aggi's Day. Tia Pukitan? T Pukitan? First? Huh. Oh, is it the bird people? I see.
Well, don't suppose I'll ever look at Aggi's room the same way again, will I?
Morris, take a look at those skulls, please.
The skulls? Well, they have memories inside them?
Not quite. Look, I didn't explain this before because I felt things were confusing enough, but that slicing is a bit more powerful than I've led you to believe.
Oh, well, what do you mean?
Okay.
Well, we aren't limited to memories of people who are alive. People are bounded by time, but memories aren't. Check it out.
Okay. Oh. Hello?
Oh, I didn't think dead stomachs could get queasy, but here we are. Where are we, Sparky?
When are we, Morris? This is Shelmerston in Aggi's time. You should be able to find some memories of her here.
You are some dog, Sparky.
Okay, so it's not this guy. We're looking for the... Oh yeah, here we go. Unap's hut. Village Elder.
It was the worst night in the world when Aggi was born. It began in the old village, the one swept away by the rivers of fire. The ground shook and the earth split open and spat sparks. The sun hid and the huts burst into flame as we fled. I thought we would all die, everyone washed in the burning orange death, and Aggi's mother howling with the pain of the child coming. We made it as far as the cliff top by the sea. The mountain was still roaring and roaring. The rock ran in rivers toward the sea. The air smelled of death and poison. But Aggi was perfect. Small and angry, her tiny fists pummeling the air. I used my knife to cut the cord. We chose a spot for the new village closer to the beach. The burning rivers cooled to pumice and black glass. I made sure everyone knew that a life that began in this way would be special. Not everyone believed me, but Aggi proved me right.
My goodness. Giving birth like that must have been awful. What a terrifying situation.
So, where do you think that knife is? Should we look around here, or...?
No, I'm pretty sure I've seen that knife before. Back at the museum, I reckon.
Okay, Morris, let's go.
Okay. How do we... Oh, it just says... Back to museum. I have to hold it. Here we go. Knife? Where would a knife be? Oh, there it is.
Beautiful. And to think that people had not long stopped using flint tools when this was made.
There is so much history in this knife.
Ooh.
I'd love to see what else it got up to.
Okay, so another skull then?
I'm getting the scent of Grenkins again, Morris. I'll pop up to let you know when we're close to one.
Hello, new person. Anybody thinking about Aggi? Yeah, goats. Anybody at all? Oh! A fish person! Kirk.
Of course we watched her. We had heard of her birth and seen her on the shore. Her feet sometimes in the seawater, her body in the sun. We did not show ourselves at first. As a test, we left the mirror on the black shore, born of the volcano on the same day as her, and waited to see what would happen, to see if it called to her. She picked it up, turned it from side to side. She took it home. The next time I saw her, I introduced myself. We sang together, and I showed her how the mirror worked. How if you emptied your mind and thought of air and light and sea, you would see things in its surface. How things would unfurl in the future. Aggi was better at mirror gazing than any of us sea folk. She saw a girl, her own daughter not yet born as leader of the dry folk. I told Aggi to keep on gazing into that mirror, that one day the island would need something more than a leader.
Oh, I had a box of rocks that looked like that mirror somewhere. Where did I put it?
Back to the museum, I suppose. What's this thing for sure? Hot dog. Alright, time to find a mirror stone. Oh, is that it? Is that not it? Come on. No? I mean, I guess it doesn't have the carvings on the back of it. Inside these geodes? No. Pretty though. Louis. Just a lobster popped. Oh, no way. I've been going around this whole thing, and there was a box? Are you kidding me? Oh my god. That took so long. That was dirty. That was a dirty trick.
Whoa. This thing is really powerful, Morris. Can you feel it?
Yeah, but I'm kind of over it now. Back to Aggi. Anybody thinking of Aggi? Where are ya? Here we go. Who are you? Oh, Aggi's daughter.
I was always fearless. My mother Aggi told me there was nothing I couldn't do. With Otsul and without, I hunted the deer in the woods and the hares on the mountain, all before I had taken my first lover. And younger still, one time Aggi had me knock her tooth out when she was in terrible pain. I didn't mind even when the blood poured out. It was easy for me. Spears and knives were my nature. Death and courage were my meat and drink. I knew about Aggi's mirror, of course, but did not believe all of it. When Aggi warned us the Morlo was sick and there would be fewer calves for the following years, none of us listened. It was to be my first cull. I wanted their blood. It was my nature. We would not take less of the Morlo just because an old woman told us to. She came to the beach after the Morlo slaughter, her hair wild, eyes burning with fury, raged and shouted like a woman out of her mind. "We had killed too many," she said. Then she left the village, told us she was done with all of us, forever. As Otsul marked me with oil and blood, I did not mourn my mother leaving. I was young and foolish, and the sight of her ashamed me. But of course, I did not see what was to come.
Not a very good daughter.
To think that they were still having the same arguments about the Morlo way back in the Bronze Age.
Aggie must have sensed the trouble ahead. Maybe she was trying to find a way to prevent it.
Okay, back to museum. Okay, it's not these things. Oh, there it is. Edwardian Morlo oil lamp. Oh, it's a different one. Oh yeah, here it is.
What a beautiful object. Delighted to have it in our museum.
Okay, back to Aggi. Here we go. Hello, sir. Aggi? Anybody? Oh, there they are over there. Oh, another fish person.
She was alone, and I would bring her food sometimes, samphire and sea urchins. She would make dry food and we would eat it together. Textures unlike any we knew that broke apart in your hands and in your mouth. We would sing together, make tea together. We became her family. The dry folk left her alone. She had a companion for a few seasons, a hind who came down from the mountain and slept at her fire. And then, for a few more, a golden hare that ate from her hand. One night we all felt it, those of us in the water and those above, the island waking, rumbling, alive again, more furious than before. I found Aggi awake, tending her fire, unsleeping, unresting, staring into her mirror. She told me she'd seen the island sinking into orange fire and boiling sea, lost forever above and below. The village and our town in the sea caves, all gone.
Oh no.
Aggi went to the shore and blew the sinistral shell, calling our people up from the water. Aggi sang for them, the oldest song, and we spoke for some time. That night, the sea and sky was all the same color, a deep grey blue like a mackerel's back without the glitter. As the dawn approached, Aggi left the beach to return to her people, to tell them what must be done.
I'm not sure. I want to see what happens next.
Back to the museum. Okay, I know I've seen this shell before. Where was it? It's not in here. Oh, duh. There it is.
Such a small thing. But it changed the entire course of our island.
Okay. Back to Aggie now. Oh, it's a fish person's skull. Hello, fish person. Kirk, I guess. Otsu.
We heard the shell and knew Aggi had returned. Ibni was the leader then. It had taken many seasons, more than we would have liked, but there were finally enough Morlo again and our village was growing. We were strong. Some of the younger ones didn't know Aggi and didn't want to hear her, called her a moon-shot crone, but Ibni looked in her mother's face and saw the truth of it. The end would come. The earth was growling again. There would be hot rivers of death and clouds of poison. But Aggi brought us the answer. She would give herself to the island. Ibni's voice shook. Surely a deer or a goat would be enough. The year's finest, blackest calf. Aggi cast down her eyes and shook her head. We all knew. I offered my blade, but Aggi turned me away. She took her knife that had cut her own cord the night the volcano last erupted and wrapped Ibni's fingers tight around the bone hilt. It must be you, Ibni, she said, and it must be now before the sun comes up. This day, this morning, or we are all gone. The village, the people, the island. Aggi embraced her daughter. Ibni whispered something, but I could not catch the words. Both women's faces shone with tears. Aggi sat on the ceremonial stone, the tears streaming now from all of us. Aggi delivered her final message. She told us her body must not be burned or given to the sea, but lain in the earth of the island beneath the mountain. Ibni was shaking, and then I realized it was not just Ibni. The whole island was trembling under our feet, waking up. Aggi told Ibni to be quick, the end was coming. As Aggi took Ibni's hand and guided the knife to her side, we saw the fish folk rising from the sea, hundreds of them, so many. I had no idea there were so many. Aggi was quiet the whole time, but Ibni cried out. A sound of longing and hurting from her heart like I had never heard. Then she fell silent, and as Aggi's life poured from her body, the island and everything on it fell suddenly still. Utterly still. We wept then, in sorrow and relief. Then the fish folk were among us, countless, numberless. One embraced Ibni, holding her up as it seemed her own legs might give way. When the sun came up that day, land and sea folk stood together for the first time, talking and singing the old songs, Aggi's songs, together. Ibni and the fish folk took Aggi up onto the mountain. They laid her in the peat alongside the knife and all the things she would need on her journey. Ibni watched over Aggi for days afterwards. Before she was covered, she placed a sacred carved stone, Aggi's beloved hair, inside her mother's mouth.
Aww.
To guide her and help her keep the mountain still forever. And so it was.
What a horrible thing to have to do.
Oh, Aggi. Now that's bravery.
Alright, back to the museum. So we have to look inside of Aggi now? Oh.
Hey, Sparky, it feels a bit, disrespectful looking inside Aggi's body like that.
Yeah.
You were the one who dug her up and put her on a plinth, Morris.
Also true.
But I...
Relax, Morris. This body isn't Aggie anymore. She's long past needing this old thing.
Well, all right then.
Okay. So then... Sparky?
Okay, Morris. I'll level with you. We absolutely didn't need to find Aggie's mementos in order for me to sniff her out. She's here, and waiting for you. She has been this whole time.
But then, why did we need to visit the Bronze Age?
Aggie thought it was important for you to see those memories, so you would understand her path before you met her. But also, wasn't it cool?
That it was. The things I've seen now. Oh, Sparky, thank you so much. To think, for a while there, I was worried that being dead was gonna be boring.
You are very welcome, Morris. Okay, so, shall we go say hello to Aggie?
Yes!
Okay. This is Aggie.
Morris! Sparky! It's so good to see you both.
Hey, Aggie.
Wait, you know me?
Of course I do. Morris Lupton, one of the best-loved men in the history of Shelmerston, with the very finest dog.
Me? Oh, I don't know.
Come now. Let's go out of this place, into the air.
The one part of Shelmerston that looks just the same as the first day I saw it. I suppose it always will.
I love this beach. It's always been my favourite beach. I'm gonna go run.
Aggie, look at Sparky. She's shining.
That's the hope and the joy shining out of her.
That's it, isn't it? The point of all of this.
It is hope, home. This island, it chose the two of you just as it chose me.
And where will you be heading now? Heaven or something?
Heaven? What's that?
Well, I don't quite know how to explain it, but to me, it would be an awful lot like this beach.
I don't know where I'm going, but I'm hoping to see Ibni, my daughter. It's been a very long time, but I remember her. We never forget the ones we love, do we, Morris?
No, I don't suppose we do.
I think she wants something, Morris.
Huh. Would you look at that? I just found a tennis ball in my pocket. Here you are, girl.
Aww. It's getting me a little bit teary-eyed. Whew, the end. What a sweet ending. I think this whole game was just so sweet and endearing and cute and wholesome. I liked how all the characters were individuals and they all had quirks and none of them were perfect. Some less than others, maybe, like Greg, but like at their root, they were all treated like real people worth knowing. And I really liked that about fleshing out the characters and everything. If you haven't played this, I recommend playing it. I know that you just watched me play it, I think experiencing it yourself is well worth it. Really well done, I thought. The art style is cute. I like the colors, the simplicity of it. Thanks for watching. Catch you next time. Bye.